This is the Air Center A crit. You can think of this as a 1-2-3 crit, although it's not a USAC crit. Pete, right now, I think you are just about to go to the front and start railing it when no one's off the front. Why would you do that?
Yeah, well, this race is kind of interesting in the fact that it either slows down or goes really fast, and that doesn't really lay into the land of breakaways very well. So to make everybody tired for a lap, I thought I would ride real hard on the front.
And we should say here that Pete obviously doesn't have a front camera. We just have Pete's rear view.
Yes.
And we'll be bouncing between mine, Jonathan's, Nate's, and Pete's different views here.
So we were trying to do a 1-2-3 attack, or one person would go and the next person and the next person would go. We didn't do that perfectly the whole race, but we did it well at the end.
And the point was we were trying to make it hard and selective so that one of us would get up the road, basically, yep. And then in a good break, not just any break, but in a good break that could be successful.
Be selective.
And then we'd patrol thereafter.
Trying to choose how we wanted the race to unfold. And as you can see, there's still 20 guys in the race pretty much, and there's about 15 minutes left. So it's been hard the whole race, and as you can see, I'm still just trying to keep it strung out, keep everybody tired.
Yeah, and something interesting to show here, Pete's keeping the speed high, and the benefit of that, Pete, versus just sitting up and letting an attack come, why is it beneficial to keep the speed high like that?
Yeah, I mean, this really kind of our group dynamic means that we have a few super strong guys and then a lot of people who fill in the rest. And so when the pace is really high, we get to choose who can attack. We make it so it's only the strong guys can attack, and that way we're in control of the situation a little more.
In other words, anybody can attack when it's slow.
Exactly.
Right? But it's really hard to attack when it's already going fast.
Once everybody's tired.
It makes everyone tired. That's the key point, is that I've been in races where it's just slowed the whole time, and whenever someone's attacks, everyone just catches on. So Pete's now rolled off the front, and Jonathan is about to slingshot through.
About to attack at some point here, and here I go. And since it's slowed down like that, once again, we're just trying to do the 1-2-3 punch, right? So Pete did a long pull. Here's my attack.
And really, a lot of times in these races, it's the group just ends up stopping to chase rather than one person does this really powerful attack.
It's like everybody says that's one step too far.
Yep, and everyone looks at each other, and that's what gives the extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds gap.
And there's a couple teams in this race. By the end of the race, your teammates are a little more tired, so we're not covering quite the same. But in this race, there's never a real chase. It's people covering moves or the field kind of sitting up. That's the way it always shakes out.
And I saw at this point that the field caught on, so I went into the gutter because the wind is coming on to my left shoulder, if you can, kind of a cross headwind.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to give anybody a free ride. And look at that. Pete rolls forward, keeps the pace high. It's perfect.
That's probably where you're expecting me to do that. But luckily Pete did it.
Yeah, and this course is always a little swirly. You can see that big fence on our left. That always blocks the wind, and so all of a sudden it turns into kind of a right shoulder cross headwind here. So it's an interesting course, and it always keeps you on your toes, and positioning matters a lot more on this really basic kind of not even 4-corner, 2-corner crit.
So I'm attacking here. I'm trying to get a little bit of draft of Pete coming through. But you had just made it fast. And going through this corner, kind of getting a good line and trying to get separation.
One interesting thing, too, is that Pete was making it fast, right? And then as soon as Pete pulled off, it would slow down so much every time. That was a clear indication that you were pushing the limits of the field. So it was like the perfect time for you to attack, Nate.
Yeah, and really, I don't think I did an extraordinary job of power on the separation. The field just didn't chase hard.
It was the perfect time.
Yeah, it was great timing. As you can see, it's almost ideal. If you can be accelerating when the field is decelerating, that's when you get the biggest differential, and it takes so much less work to get you. You already have 10 seconds with almost no work.
And now they're starting to pull. The speed starts to kick up, and you can see from Jonathan's power meter that when he's in the group and there's an acceleration where it goes up to 400 watts and he's still in a draft, that's an acceleration happening.
Yep.
So now they're starting to. And another thing that I've learned recently that I used to do really poorly is after separation, I didn't commit myself. I didn't try to go too deep. I tried to think of, okay, there's probably, 10, 15 minutes left. What kind of power can I hold for 15 minutes? And try to do that. So many times I've done it where I kind of drop myself from the lead, where I'm trying to do 400, 500 watts for a minute, and then I can't do anything, and I just pull back.
Really, you just need that initial separation, and then you need enough to hold it, right, Pete?
Right, exactly. You want to do the same power as the front of the field, or same speed. And so if you get the free 10 seconds without a real attack, then it's just mono a mono or mono front of the race.
Yep. And you'll see that Pete and I at this point, we're at the front patrolling more or less. We're ready so that if somebody, bridges across that we feel is dangerous, or we're hoping that we're ready to be able to do something like that. We're pretty blown at this point. But we're basically patrolling the front. You can see, it's not particularly hard, and this is just letting Nate, even though Nate, if you look, Nate's fluctuating high 200s to low 300s basically, so he's staying within himself, but you're still able to ride away from us because we're at 25 miles an hour. You're a touch higher sometimes.
So this ending part, I think my normalized power was 330 for the last 15 minutes, which for me is not a threshold 340, so kind of high sweet spot-ish. But I was, like you guys, I was really tired.
Yeah, and everybody was tired by the end of this race. You saw Scott Waters just make the bridge up. As you can see, John and I were kind of on the wrong side of the wheels to cover him. And I remember talking to John saying, like, well, it's Scott making the whole bridge by himself, and I'm okay with, I don't think he's going to make it, pretty much.
But then he makes it.
And then he makes it right across.
So we're almost caught by the time that Scott, no, actually, sorry. We're still pretty close right now with Scott there, but he saved everything. He saved me. By having one extra rider, it's amazing how much more fresh and how much faster you can go.
Oh yeah.
It's also another good reason not to, if you're going solo, not to really go all in right away, because if you can get one or two riders with you, then you can get a lot more separation than trying to do it all by yourself and doing that reverse, like where you just keep coming back.
Yep.
And at this point, we have his teammate up at the front, just marshalling and blocking. And when we say blocking, we're not talking about like doing anything bad. We're just talking about sitting at the front.
And yeah, he's going 22 miles an hour. And I mean, it's really about being. You just want to interrupt the flow of people working, and as you can see, nobody's working. So it's not like our blocking is really disruptive. It's just no one's actually working to bring those two guys back.
And it's not even like interrupting the flow. It's just getting on the front, and anyone can pull around. Somebody accused me on this course of like blocking the road, and there's probably no wider crit course you've ever done. You cannot block the road on this course. We could all ride side by side and just be fine. So that's another thing though to watch out for, is this happens all the time. If you're who's ever up the road, watch who's on front, and if it's the same jersey,
they're intentionally there.
Yeah, and they're intentionally going at 22 miles per hour, and it feels so good that when you're back there, you're like the warm embrace.
You into it.
And you go, oh, finally, I don't have to pull. But it's actually a bad thing for you because the breakaway is just getting more and more seconds.
Yep, and Pete and I were just kind of staying sharp at the front, ready just in case something happened. And the riders that you see off to the side here, we're looking at some lapped traffic. That's not Nate getting caught.
You want to go to the last lap?
One question before we do that. When did you start to feel like, okay, this brake is going to stick? Like, we're probably not going to get caught?
Probably around here. So I was looking back, and I couldn't, like, the field was smaller. And what I started to do was do a harder, I did two things. One is, when it was my turn to pull, I would start to accelerate more than you probably should, because I wanted Scott to be tired and have an acceleration too. So normally that's a faux pas, right? Because you want everyone in the group to be smooth and fast.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But this, I want to do little bits of damage.
Let's fast forward to see that very thing. That'd be cool.
Great. So this backside with Scott was all into a headwind, and I wanted him to pull into that. And then this is actually, I guess it was a cross headwind, but this is the real main part where there was a big headwind. And every lap, this would then go into a crosswind, and I wanted to pull in the crosswind because then he gets less benefit, right? So if you can make, on a one-on-one, if you can make your person, your team, or not teammate, companion, pull in the headwind, that's always great. So he flicks me through here, and then I do a big surge, and you can watch, he actually has to get out of the saddle to get into my draft. And this is a lap and a half to go, so I want him tired.
Yeah, and not only that, you're also not taking the windward side. So he doesn't get any shelter when you're coming around. He stays in the wind the whole time as you come around.
So the wind's going left to right in that section, and I passed on the right side, where normally in a breakaway, you want to go to the left side to shelter that person.
Correct.
And then so I'm going to pull all the way until the headwind section. And I don't know why he was letting me do this, but I was looking him through on the headwind section and having him pull. Why What would you do, Pete, if someone was doing that to you?
You can kind of fudge the area where you pull a little bit, and you have to think about how it's shaping out as the race progresses. So you always want to push the rotations towards when it's going to benefit you. So you did a great job of that, as giving the person the elbow right when you need them to. And Scott could have not pulled through and put a little pressure on you, but he just came right through.
So this is last lap coming up, and this is the headwind section, and I flicked my elbow, and he's pulling all the way through.
Now, knowing the rider that you are, you know Scott knows you in terms of your riding abilities and everything else.
Yeah.
This is definitely, I mean, 5 laps to go, this sort of a thing with you two. If it was just a pure sprinter that you know is just going to sprint late at the line, then you're probably not as worried right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I definitely would have had you marked. I would have been like, Nate's going to go sometime really soon.
Yeah, if you watch the previous videos, I usually go from minute 50 seconds out. So on this one,
it's not exact or anything.
Yeah, it just lined up really well. That time period was exactly when his pulls were normally ending, which I kind of planned ahead of time, and it was right after he did a headwind section. So you're going to watch here. I'm going to go. And he gets a little surprised, and I think Scott or Pete, is it a little bit because this is normally where I pull through, so he's not expecting me to attack?
For sure, and as you come through and he sees you for that quarter of a second and goes, oh, Nate's pulling through, and then all of a sudden he realizes you're doing 1,200 watts, and he has to get on the wheel. But he also took a nice hard pull with one lap to go, which is a little crazy to me, but you punished him for it, as you can see.
So the interesting thing is there's one thing about snapping at the end, like doing a quick snap and then holding it, but you really burned that thing for a long time. I mean, you stayed at 1,000 watts, then you dropped down to like 600 to 400.
Yes.
And look at how big the gap is. I can't see Scott.
So I looked behind me, and I was trying to break him because Scott has such a long sprint that I knew even if I had 10 seconds of gap on him, over 30 seconds, he could come back if he wanted to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But then when I had the gap, I looked back, and he started looking behind him to see who's coming up. And as soon as he did that, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Because I was, you can probably hear in the video, I'm coughing and like had phlegm in my throat and dying. But it worked out. Really, on paper, I shouldn't have been able to beat Scott. So it kind of, everything aligned correctly to be able to surprise, go at my best power, and have him pull into the headwind and come around on the non-headwind side.
Now, one thing you might ask is why we didn't go with Scott. And really, it's always tricky. And one of the big things here is like team communication, because both of us thought, okay, Nate hasn't done any work. He's probably super fresh.
He's totally fine.
So we thought, you know what? In this case, Nate's got him, right? And you did end up getting him. But like you said, on paper, though, it was definitely a close one between you two.
You want to do the finish for you guys?
Yeah, because that's interesting too.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, so you can see right now it's Nate's up the road and Pete was pulling, and I actually looked at you right there, Pete, and I was like, hey, you want to lead me out?
And I said, of course.
So at that point, I was like, well, let me go to the front to give you a little bit of a break, because you had been pulling here for a bit. Not crazy hard, but enough.
A couple laps of enough to let Nate win, but not to let anyone attack.
And at this point, we knew they'd win, so we started picking the pace up, and it got single file. If you look behind us, it gets pretty skinny.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I'm doing a pull that's not fully, all the way in, but at least I'm still keeping it faster than nobody wants to come around us.
Exactly, and it's the high speed, right? Nobody wants to attack when you're already going 27 or 28 miles an hour, and that keeps everybody in line. So then after a nice break, I can get back on the front, and one of the hard parts with this lead out especially is you have to keep the speed high enough nobody can attack and still accelerate at the end, which is hard to do.
Really hard. Especially at the end of a hard race when we're dealing with headwinds and we're dealing with everything else. But you can see you've ramped it up. We're at 27 now, and we're picking up. And I'm sitting behind you roughly. My threshold's probably at this point when we did this race probably somewhere around like 295. So I'm sitting in that sweet spot and tempo zone behind you.
Right,
so I'm getting some rest.
Exactly, and my whole goal is to not surge at all and to give John an armchair lead out. So his whole goal is to come around me when I start slowing down, which as I get to the final corner, it's all about keeping the speed high through it and then hopefully accelerating after the fact.
Yeah.
This final corner is like 600 meters from the finish probably, so I need to take you further than this. So
you'll see also going into that last turn there, you saw a surge in power, and that was because I was telling Pete, up it, pick it up, trying to get the speed higher. At this point, I think this is great. Pete's getting out of the saddle. I'm stepping up around 500 watts, but I missed it. I screwed it up because as soon as your speed started tapering off, I should have kicked off. And what happened instead was Jose, the super fast sprinter, he pipped me at the line because he just got that millisecond of an advantage.
Yep.
Right. It's the small hesitation that I did that completely screwed up the lead up. Lead out.
Let's go back and look at that.
So Pete's really ramping it up now, 31 miles an hour.
You got to go here, right?
That's here is where I should have gone. When he got into the saddle, I should have been going, and I hesitated.
Yeah, and as you can see, I thought I had a little more in the tank, and I stand up, and usually that means it's up to you to kind of snap through my acceleration, so you never deal with any of my deceleration, and you catch everybody off guard, and it's only like that 1/10 of a second. I mean, it's almost nothing, but in the end, it turns out to...
So as soon as you snapped, I should have snapped too, right? And instead what I did is I hesitated.
Yep.
I feel like you were about to go around him, and then Pete snapped, but didn't have any snap, but you were already on the side of him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like two bad things in a row where... So how do you know when to go around someone if you're not practiced?
Really, as soon as they slow down, your sprint's kind of ruined. So you have to anticipate them giving up at some point in time and beat them.
So is it kind of up to me to determine when your sprint runs out, so to speak? Like I just kind of decide this is when I need to go, and when I go around you, that's when you quit, rather than me waiting for you to quit?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not a very good lead-out man, I will say. So
great for me.
Would you ever flick your elbow or anything to say now's the time I'm about to die?
Well, you could, and the way I always feel the lead-out should go is pretty much while I was standing up, I would expect multiple people to come around me, and I think a lot of people waited for you to go rather than having you hit, and that was surprising to me. A lot of people should start their sprint while the final lead out is still happening. It just kind of makes sense that way.
Those are some good tips.
Well, thanks for not chasing me down, guys. Really, that's the difference, is just people not chasing rather than being overpowering the group.
But thanks for clinching it too. You delivered. You closed on it, right?
Thanks, guys.
If you like that video, subscribe to our channel and give this video that you just watched a like or even a comment down below.
If you want to check out more race analysis videos, click on me.
And if you want your coaching questions answered, click on me.
And if you want to find out more about what we do here at TrainerRoad, you can go to TrainerRoad.com.